Hi, this is Frank with a Frank Opinion again. You've probably seen, if you're following my videos, this particular chart in the last two, and I'm going to have this for today and for the next video because I think that it's absolutely critical for Americans to concentrate not on the devastating war between the President-elect's family and Nordstrom's, but on this chart here. Very quickly, from 1979 to 2017, corporate profits at an all-time high, corporate cash at an all-time high, and workers' wages stagnant. And there's been report after report over the last number of years with regard to this phenomenon. So when we say that we're exceptional, that there's something so-called American exceptionalism, it's exceptional because we have the largest income and wealth disparity in the world in terms of developed countries. In September 30th of 2015, Fortune magazine, not a leftist magazine, Fortune magazine, said America is the richest and most unequal country. At that point, and it's been obliterated, the United States had a total wealth of $63.5 trillion in personal household wealth. Now mind you that only 20 individuals in the United States own as much wealth as the bottom half of our entire population. The world in September of 2015 had a total wealth of $153.2 trillion. We had 41.6% of that a year and a half ago. China was a distant second at 10.5. In January of 2016, The Atlantic came out with this particular article, Why Are So Many Middle-Aged White Americans Dying? Longevity becoming less, not longer. Middle-aged white Americans, the article said, have been getting sicker and dying in greater numbers, even as the rest of the world is living longer and healthier. And the authors call this despair deaths, mainly suicide, drug overdoses, and alcohol-related liver diseases. And guess where the bulk of that was occurring? In the southern states. Red states. West Virginia, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, and Arkansas. By the way, this does not mean that minorities, African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanics, are doing a whole lot better than whites. It just pointed out that for the first time, the longevity, the mortality of working white Americans was actually getting less, whereas the rest of the world was gaining. Another article in July of 2016, the poor at 20, poor for life. Why? Because there was another article that came in December that said that basically now 30-year-olds have a 50% chance of exceeding the income and wealth of their parents. This is down from 90% in 1970 and 80% 10 years after that, in 1980. So, coincident with this chart, 1979 to 2017. Before 1979, not so bad. After 1979, very bad. This income and wealth gap continues to grow as we speak. I showed another chart, which I'm going to get for you if I don't destroy this entire process here. And I showed this, that our congressional representatives, House of Representatives and Senate, allowed someone, and still does, to make $4 billion, that's 9 zeros, which equates to $33,333 per minute, based on a 40-hour work week and 50-week work year. And let me give you a couple of other ways of looking at that. The average 401k balance, depending on the report that I just read, for a 55-year-old is $177,000. That's his little nest egg to supplement Social Security. if he's been actually declaring his wages and gaining a Social Security history. A lot of CPAs and accountants tell you hide your money, but if you hide your money in order not to pay taxes, the dreaded word, you're not developing a Social Security history. So let's assume that the person has a Social Security history but doesn't have a pension. $177,000 is the average for a 55-year-old working today. Now, if both of these individuals, this hedge fund manager that put his $4 billion in a money market fund because he's scared of the market himself, if he made 1% on that money market, what did he make in that year? $40 million. 1% in the money market, $4 billion, gives you $40 million. He didn't have to work. $40 million. That poor working stiff that has $177,000 in their 401k, they make 1%. What do they get? $1,770. Tremendous difference. And this is another reason why the wealth gap continues to grow. One last way of looking at it. This $4 billion equals the 401k average balance times 22,500 people. 22,500 Americans with an average balance in their 401k of $177,000 gives you approximately the $4 billion. Now, as we look at this unbelievable exceptionalism, I bring you back to why it's possible for that to take place. It's possible because of a loophole that has existed for years, called a carried interest loophole, that allows the hedge fund manager, pardon my slipping away there for a minute, to be taxed on the bulk of his earnings, so-called earnings, at a capital gains rate, which is roughly half of the top income tax rate for wealthy Americans. So instead of the 39.6, 60–70% of his income for the year is taxed at 20%. Half of what working Americans are taxed at. Now, how do you imagine that this takes place? Well, we go back to the first chart. If Americans concentrate on the war between the President-elect and Nordstrom's, or whether General Mike Flynn is going to be fired tonight or tomorrow because of his conversations eating borscht with the Russians before the election actually took place, and you keep your eye away from this, it continues to happen. And it affects your children, your grandchildren, and future generations. Let me give you a couple of tools that you might want to use. And I'll be doing this with each video. So there are two sites that I'd like you to put in your web browser, Congress.Gov and followthemoney.org. Let me start with this one. I know how my senator, who I sat next to at a meeting a few years back because I was representing an organization, and when I asked him about the End Tax Loopholes bill that was introduced by Senator Carl Levin and also reintroduced by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse a year later when Carl Levin retired, he had very little knowledge of it. They hadn't contacted him. I was really taken aghast that my senator, Senator Charles Schumer, did not know about a critically important Senate bill called Senate 268 that, amongst other things, would have ended this carried interest loophole. But then, if you go to Follow the Money, you kind of find out where my senator, Senator Charles Schumer, is getting his donations from. I think it's very important on a local level to look at where your congresspeople and your senators are getting their money from. Follow the money in terms of the donations. Congress.Gov, how are they on legislation in terms of their sponsorship or co-sponsorship and their ultimate vote. Okay, so those are two. In terms of reading material, you start with this. I've mentioned this before last year in previous videos. It's a $12 Penguin Civics book on the Federalist Papers, actually known as the Federalist. You know why this is all marked up? Because you will be proud as punch, being an American, if you get this book and look at the way they write and what they had in mind in terms of the Constitution. You won't get this from tweets. You'll actually have to pick up, this is an abbreviated version. There are 85 Federalist Papers or essays. This contains the most important. Please pick this up. Again, eye on the ball. Eye on this. It doesn't matter whether you're our current president, President Pence, President Clinton, President Obama, of whoever. If they're not trying to close this, they're not serving you. If your congresspeople and your senators are not trying to close this, they are not serving our country. That's it for today. Thank you for listening.